just it's wonderful, the opportunities that are now available to my nieces that I didn't even dream of. And it's called Ahdlal because Ahdlal is, from Dhul, which is the shade of the tree, and it's in the shade of the trees that the community came to pass knowledge. I spent my childhood weekends being volunteered, not necessarily willingly. There was this idea of these pieces living far later, far longer than I would. They'd always be there, that someone would always be wearing them. There's something about that idea that I like.
I'm very excited to have you on. You and I had an informal chat, I think it was about 6 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I realized, firstly, that we had relatively similar paths. I think we're similar ages. We have a lot of memories of being in France, of being in England. Of obviously, you're Saudi. You were born and raised in Saudi. I grew up in Saudi, so there seems to be a lot of points of reference that we have in common. And so for me, that was a very comfortable and nice place to jump off from. So anyway, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Let's talk a little bit about so your early childhood, your teens were spent in Riyadh.
Yes.
And then you moved to the UK. Was that at the university time or after that?
No, I graduated. I graduated in Saudi, Jamiat al-Malik Saud, with a BA in English Lit. And then I went to the UK to discover myself. So I had a year of just really doing many, many, many sorts of creative studies, creative project. I did everything. I mean, I went through painting and ceramics, and then.
Was that because you ended up choosing English literature because the creative options were not available in Riyadh at the time? Or did you discover that that was an area you wanted to maybe look into?
So I think that's twofold, right? The first thing, yes, when I was growing up, absolutely, there was a lack of options when it came to education for women. And I happened to be an avid reader. I loved books. And I loved, diving into the imaginary world. And so it seemed the most obvious choice of what was there for me. I always knew that I was creative. I come from a very creative family. I mean, you have HRH Faisal, who is also a painter. My father was a poet. My grandfather was also a very well-known poet. He wrote songs from Kalthum and Abdul Halim. And we have that creativity sort of gene within the family. But because I think maybe creativity was not prioritized, even from a childhood level, a school level. What that really meant was that by the time I graduated, I knew I wanted to do something creative, and I had no idea what it was going to be because I'd not had those years of experimentation.
Sure, sure.
That's when my dad, God bless him, God rest his soul, said to me, just go do everything and just find what you want to do. So I did that for 1 year. I did everything. And it was fantastic.
You mentioned ceramics, you mentioned painting. And was that within a sort of a structured program, or you did?
No. I did certification courses because it was just an introductory thing. That was the first time I came across jewelry design as well. I got a little bit, let's say, frightened of the jewelry at the time because really what I was doing was jewelry making.
Yeah.
And I can't make jewelry. I am not a crafts person.
Sure.
I have nothing but respect for them, but I have that talent. And
working with the hands is a very special gift.
I actually was dangerous to others. I mean, people actually bled, and I have horrific memories. and I thought, right,
we cannot give you tools. We cannot give you tools.
No, you cannot. But actually, after that, I thought, I went back to it as design as a hobby later on. But I ended up studying again and getting certified as an interior designer.
And so this was your first foray into creativity. you had done an interior design course, and then you came back to Saudi to sort
I
of use
never
it.
came back to Saudi for that, because what had happened was, this is where fate and everything kind of takes a weird sort of turn. My graduation project at the time was a jewelry shop. So I was
Hmm.
designing a jewelry shop. Through some kind of miscommunication or something, a friend of my mother's who was doing an exhibition of jewelers. So she participated with multiple jewelers, and she was doing an exhibition in London. And she said that she approached me and she said, I really want to have a Saudi jeweler participating as well. And I'm Saudi, and I wanted to showcase a Saudi jeweler. And at that time, I had a sketchbook full of designs, and I'd sort of done a few pieces for my mum where I'd redesigned them for her and stuff. But I'd never really looked at it as a career thing. And she said, I showed her the sketchbook, and right after graduation we went off, we took the train, the Eurostar, to Paris, and we went to about 4 or 5 different uh, workshops, jewelry workshops, and showed them, and they each chose one of my designs, and we had them all made. And my first exhibition was before I was actually a jeweler. But off the back of that, what happened was I got offered an internship because they'd seen my sketchbook at one of these workshops. And so I ended up going from London straight to Paris. And I apprenticed for about a year in a workshop in Place Vendôme.
That's very interesting. So which jeweler was that?
It was Gerlin, and they were really one of the top workshops at the time. So they worked with all the big brands. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. It was really something I loved.
So you were able to create designs and then see them implemented.
Absolutely. And not only that, I got to share a workspace with a master jeweler, Thierry Martin, who was absolutely, to this day, the most talented jewelry designer I've come across. It was a real apprenticeship. He'd sort of, we'd on our lunch hour, we'd walk around the windows in Place Vendôme, and we'd critique the jewelry because, this is like this, oh, I really like this, isn't this interesting? He took me to the gem dealers.
And Nourah, what was it about jewelry per se that was so attractive as opposed to other arts? Like, as you said, you tried ceramics, you tried interiors, painting. What was it about jewelry that grabbed you so much?
So on the one hand, for me, at the time, definitely it was the preciousness of the materials.
Hmm.
And also I'd always loved jewelry. I mean, I'm not gonna say all women love jewelry, but we have a weakness, most of us, to it. And it was something that there's something about the emotional connection with jewelry that I've always found beautiful. There's some sentimentality. It's related to family celebrations. It's related to, so it has this multi-generational kind of
Yeah,
thing.
definitely. I mean, definitely when you have an heirloom or something's been passed down in the family, it has a lot of significance. And, you treasure those much more than newer pieces or,
Absolutely. And there was this idea of these pieces living far later, far longer than I would. They'd always be there, that someone would always be wearing them. There's something about that idea that I like.
there is something exciting about that. And if you were to pinpoint a period, I have a weakness for Art Deco
Oh God, yes. Art
as a
Deco,
period.
all the way Art Deco. And if you look at my jewelry, you'll see that it is heavily influenced by Art Deco.
Yeah, yeah. We in Egypt, I know we had a big tradition of having a lot of Art Deco pieces from the time of King Fuad and King Farouk. A lot of the jewelry at the time was inspired by that period because it was that period, and I feel that that's always a timeless also type of style and works in a lot of modern ways as well.
Absolutely. And then there's this thing, especially with something like Art Deco, the way that it moves from, it moved from architecture, it moved from interior,
Yes.
and then it moved into jewelry. And there's that kind of that mood that translates from a large structure into a ring. And I always say or a necklace or a set. And I always say now, in hindsight, looking back at it, that I think I would have probably, had I had the opportunity, I would have most definitely been an architect, because there's something to me that connects jewelry design and architecture. And I'm most heavily influenced by architecture when it comes to my jewelry. I mean, there's a bit with flora and fauna, but generally, mostly
Yeah. It's more structural, more,
it's more structural, yeah.
yeah,
And there's something
imposing.
about the forms, and it's really just the size that's the difference, right? You're building a structure, and that's one of the things I think that I also love about jewelry.
Interesting. So it's clear that this internship played a vital point and part in how you saw your professional career, and this was a sort of a launching pad for you. Jewelry is the foundation of everything you've done after that. I mean, it's always been
Absolutely.
for you, I think, the cornerstone,
And it remains.
and it remains so. So alongside your jewelry brand, which is ongoing, I know that you are extremely involved in the Vision 2030 that the kingdom has been developing. You're part of the cornerstone of the design element. Walk me through a little bit how that came about for you, and then I'd like to go into, drill down a little bit into what that means with the Art of Heritage project and some of the other elements you're working on.
Before the announcement of Vision 2030 as Vision 2030, there were many, many elements. And actually, I had moved back to Saudi before my father passed away, because there were all these changes that were happening, and there was, and I had honestly just missed my family and wanted to come home. And I'm very, very lucky that I did, because I got to spend that 1 year with my dad before he passed away, which is a blessing.
A very big blessing, yeah.
And so when I came back, it was because there was something in the air, let's say.
Yeah.
It was very exciting, and it was a lovely feeling. It didn't have the name Vision 2030 at the time, but it was definitely there. And as I spent more and more time here and have been married and settled back in Riyadh, I felt the difficulties of being a designer based in Riyadh with all my production and everything based in another country.
Yeah.
So I started discovering, or trying to look at what it would take for me to bring my business back here in a way that made it feasible, and really understanding what the difficulties in and around that were. This was a relatively short time ago, but there's been so much change and so much progress, mashallah, in Saudi, that a lot of the problems that were there are no longer here, but we've got all kinds of new problems, which is, how evolution works, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Evolve out of something and you evolve into something else. Trying to figure out how to do that meant that I came into contact with a lot of other designers who had been based in Dubai, who had been based in the States, who had been based all over the world, who were looking
People
to.
who had a similar idea to you come
Exactly,
back.
because
Yeah.
who doesn't want to participate in such an amazing sort of human experiment.
Well, and I think fundamentally everyone wants to help their own country. I mean,
Absolutely,
that's the bottom line. You want to
absolutely,
make your country the best it can be. So it's a
absolutely.
no-brainer. Yeah.
You want to be part of that. There's something
Yes.
really important happening, and you want to be an active participant. Which is, now that I'm here and I'm participating, it's definitely my life's work for sure. There's nothing more important than that. Um, and so, having come back and realizing all the difficulties and where there were unknowns, and there were so many unknowns, what I decided to do is I kept saying, I need a map. I need someone to give me a map of like who is where and doing what, and what can, and how can they work together, and just give me a map. And then I realized that, I needed to do the thing that I wanted.
Yeah. You had to create your own map.
Exactly. So I established Adal. And it's called Ahdlal because Ahdlal is, from dhul, which is the shade of the tree, and It's in the shade of the trees that the community came to pass knowledge to each other, and Ahdlal because it's multiple communities. So it's really about that community feeling right from the name, right from the beginning. And it's about the passing on of knowledge and the sharing of.
It's lovely. And the idea of sitting together and sharing stories and passing knowledge along.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so for me, we started by creating an industry report. So focus groups, research benchmarking, to create the first industry report specifically on design. So the design ecosystem in Saudi.
And by the design community, we're talking fashion, art, jewelry. It's encompassing all of these creative arts.
It's even more than that. So it's also industrial design. It's also architecture, interior design, graphic design, UX, UI design. Uh, Really anything where creativity is the tool. And I
Right.
do argue now uh, that it would include things like strategy design, business design, and governance
Interesting.
design.
So I wanted to talk about two more things. One is the Jockey Club event. Is that the same as the Saudi Cup?
So the Jockey Club of Saudi Arabia is in charge of horse racing in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Saudi Cup is one of the races,
I
not
see.
even the final race, but it is one of the races in the Riyadh season.
I see.
So the decision was made to really focus on making the Saudi Cup an international event. So I attended the first Saudi Cup.
Yeah.
I was asked on the second Saudi Cup, which was during COVID, by the way, not the easiest thing to do.
No.
I didn't know what a bubble was, but I knew very much what a bubble was after that because we had
After
to
that.
create a bubble because we had all these people, international people coming in.
Yes,
And
yes.
I was brought in. His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman had seen the race the year before and had noticed a missed opportunity in showcasing the beautiful opportunity of showcasing Saudi culture and heritage. And so, the Ministry of Culture had just had within it the commissions. So it's got, I think it's 11 commissions. And I'm very proud to say we were the first event that worked with all of the commissions. So we had
That in itself is a feat because
it's
that's a lot of people to be dealing with.
It was, I remember our first site visit, there was like an army walking behind because each sent a team. But it was so much fun, I have to
Of
say.
course, it's super exciting to be doing that.
So we came up with the dress code, and then we came up with the identity, and then the whole process of really trying to figure out, what are people going to experience, what are they going to see, and really thinking about, okay, so what are the TV screens going to see? But then when you walk in, what are you going to experience, and then what are you going to eat? So really trying to promote the local brands and the Saudi brands within that, the restaurants, the food stuffs, all of that.
So it's very holistic experience. You're trying to
It
look at
really,
the
really
whole package. Yeah.
It really was. And I learned more than I ever thought I would ever know about the first 2 years about event planning and event management.
Yeah. It's a very intense job. I did that for a while. It's a lot of work.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of chaos. There's a lot of late nights. I mean, I literally at one point had 18-hour days work.
But it's very fulfilling when it finally comes off and it's well done.
I remember being so exhausted after my first one, and then just sort of like 3 days later suddenly wanting to call everyone and who was on the job when I had said to them, I don't want to see any of you for a year.
You had
But then
missed
like
everybody.
3 days
Yeah,
later
yeah,
three
because you're
days
you're
later
with each other so much.
something's very wrong. And I still, to this day, I'm still friends with my team. I really
Yeah,
do. I consider them lifelong friends.
yeah, yeah, of course.
And so I did that for 4 years. The third year and the fourth year, I was the Saudi Cup director. So really, I was in charge of the whole thing, apart from the equine side, obviously. But I think we've grown substantially over the last few years, up to I think it was 17,000, and I think it was 21,000 or something like that visitors over
Wow,
the course of 2 days.
that's very impressive. Yeah.
It's really become something, and it's the term, the fashion thing has gone. has gone wild, because it started out all heritage clothing, but then all the young designers wanted to take, and this is where I love the idea of, if you want to dress in heritage, you can, but if you want to take something heritage and create something
Of
crazy,
course.
you
Yeah.
can as well. And
Yeah.
it's so much fun every year to see. I mean, some of the crazy, crazy outfits. And now I think I'm very pretty sure that a lot of them just do it for PR, so it's come up with
Yeah,
the
but it's
craziest
fun.
thing we
Well,
can.
I mean, look at Royal Ascot and, Ascot for years, it's all
Yeah,
about the fashion, and
absolutely.
that's part of the fun of it. But it's interesting because on a level, there's obviously been pent up desire for an expression of
Oh,
creativity,
yeah,
and this is an outlet for it. It's wonderful.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's, I think, one of my highlights. I mean, the
Yes,
highlight
I'm
of my
sure.
work experience, growth experience. Um, it's one of those things that has actually taught me that I can do a lot more than I actually thought I
Yeah.
could.
I also think that women have an inbuilt ability to multitask that is
Yes,
unsurpassed.
absolutely.
I've spoken about it on many of my shows with a lot of women who juggle different elements, and we have that ability. It's
I
we
think we're
just are.
built for it.
Tell me about Art of Heritage. This is what your main focus is now?
So my main focuses now are Adal, Art of Heritage, and Noon. I try
Yes.
to juggle those
In
three.
that order. In that order.
Um, no, I think in the order of Art of Heritage, Adal, and Noon. My
Right.
Noon team are very going to be very unhappy to hear this. Someone's going to be angry at me either way.
That's right. So you can't please everybody. Yeah, exactly.
It depends, actually, really. The order of importance depends on the week and what's happening within that business.
Sure.
Pair.
Of
So there
course.
are times when I try to focus just on Noon because I need to be creative and I need to focus on that. There are times when there's a lot going on at Adal and I need to focus on that. Art of Heritage is ongoing. So I'm the CEO of Art of Heritage. So if I take a step back, there's an organization or an NGO in Saudi called Nahda Society for Women, a philanthropic society, and it's celebrating its 60th year now. And about the uh, it's about the empowerment of women in Saudi. So if you think about it, 60 years ago, a group of Saudi women got together and created the first NGO in Saudi Arabia to empower other
That's
women,
very
which
impressive.
in it,
And that was considered almost subversive at the time.
I wouldn't say that, considering it was my aunts that did it, but
But they were pioneers. Look at
they
it
were
that way.
definitely they were
They were
definitely pioneers,
pioneers.
but I don't think they'd approve of the word subversive.
Probably not.
Yeah,
Probably not.
because they were very open about it, right?
Okay. Okay.
I think also in our society, if you look at it, women have always taken on that role of taking care of community.
Of course. Of
Most
course.
societies, but in Saudi in particular, I think
Yeah.
that's
I
always,
think it's across the region. I think it's across the
yeah.
region.
So really, art Nahda, and then art of heritage was the cultural sort of side of that within Nahda society. So what it was about giving women the skills they needed, and that tended to be craftsmanship and things like that to order. So it was preserving heritage, passing on the knowledge of how to do that, and then. As sort of a fundraising side for Nahda, they were creating fashion objects, things like that, and then they were being sold at like annual events that were fundraising events for Nahda society.
Interesting.
But a few years later, Art of Heritage was separated. And I spent my childhood weekends being volunteered, not necessarily willingly, to work.
Well, if it's your aunt's business or your
Yeah,
aunt's,
yeah, the NGO, yeah,
endeavor, then you're going to be roped in. Yeah.
absolutely. So we were constantly always participating in it. And there are pictures out there somewhere that I hope nobody ever finds of us actually in fashion shows wearing the traditional clothing and wearing that, just kind of doing that.
Yeah. And does the NGO have a micro lending side? So do these women get
Yes, but
helped with loans in order to develop their cottage industries?
So that's one of the things that I'm working on. So they're separated. Art of Heritage is now separate from a Nahda Society. A Nahda Society has that set up, but I've only just taken over and I'm turning Art of Heritage into an NGO of its own. And we've finished and we've gotten approved the transformational plan. And now we're in the first stages of implementing it. And then now, with the knowledge and my experience within the design ecosystem, then it's like, how do I connect that to young designers? How do I connect that to all the things that are happening within the ministries? How do I connect that to the Ministry of Tourism? How do I connect that
Of
to
course.
other different events and things that are happening? And one of the events that we have going on is we have a partnership between Art of Heritage and fashion brand Sarah Kardar on a collection that hopefully we will be showcasing in London.
And I think also what's really interesting is that 60 years ago, when your aunts began it, the areas that women could work in were very limited. So it was things that they could take into the home, embroidery, crafts, etc. But obviously today, as you mentioned, tourism, women are working in tourism, so that the remit that you're working with has grown to a much
Absolutely.
larger scale.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to ensure when we're looking at Art of Heritage and how we move forward is how to not miss those opportunities because we're thinking in a way that only applied 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Really looking at how do we step into the future to provide more opportunities.
Of course. You know, I was in El Ala a year and a half ago at the time of the Islamic Biennale in Jeddah. It was 2023 in January. And I went to visit El Ala. I hadn't been before. And what struck me, among so many other things, but what struck me fundamentally was that there were women working in the tourism industry greeting us at every site that we attended,
Yeah,
that we went to visit. And I'm assuming that this is sort of one of the areas you will be developing because these are women who are from the community who are
absolutely.
being taught new skills in the service industry. And
So, I mean, really, the Ministry of Tourism, I think they celebrated, I think it was almost a year ago now, I'm not sure, but they celebrated 1 million graduates through their hospitality programs and their things that have been done for Al and for elsewhere.
yeah,
1 million
that's
graduates.
incredible. That's incredible.
That gives you
And Saudi nationals, not
all
not
Saudi,
foreign nationals. Yeah, it's amazing.
it gives you an idea of
Of the
the
scale.
potential and the
Yeah.
scale, the
Yeah.
opportunity. And we haven't even finished building all of the new things that we're building or developing all the different things that we're developing. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at how many women, I'd love to be able to know how many women, for example, are working now in Diriyah Gate development, right? That would be amazing to understand.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's wonderful the opportunities that are now available to my nieces uh, that I didn't even dream of. So it's a wonderful brand new world.
Yeah. No, I think being based in Saudi now is super exciting. I mean, it's really and all the elements and all the areas you're working in. I mean, it's fantastic. It's so exciting. You know,
It's
you have your personal creative outlet with Noon, but then you have these two other areas, which is, you know, you're giving back, you're helping the future of your country. I mean, there's so many elements here that are very exciting.
it's the reason why my husband jokes and he says she's just starting. I've retired, but